Okay, so I went through the 2017 NHL guide and record book. These are a lot of names. The guys with the asterisks, they're first round draft picks. The guys in blue, there's a reason they're in blue. All of these players coming up had to spend time in the American Hockey League. And I made it so they had to spend a minimum of about 30, 35 games in the American Hockey League. There's a reason I did this. There's a lot of guys who, when I did my season previews, have said, well, why don't you have blank in your lineup? Why isn't blank in your lineup? If a player played in junior hockey last season, and they're not the next Austin Matthews, the next Patrick Laine, they likely join this list. This isn't a list of shame. The guys in blue were forced to play in the American Hockey League during the 2004-2005 lockout. Notice, Patrice Bergeron, best defensive forward in the league, and I don't think there's very many people who would dispute that. If Datsuk was still around, Datsuk would be ahead of him. Kessler, probably right behind Bergeron. Kessler came out of the 04-05 lockout as a better player. Mikko Koivu, again, this is forced to play in the American Hockey League. Made the team the next year. Zach Parise, much better after the lockout. Jason Spezza. Spezza is an interesting person in that he didn't want to go to the American Hockey League for Ottawa the year before. He didn't have a choice in 04-05. Played great, came up the next season and played fantastic. Eric Stahl, forced to play in the American Hockey League, number 5 overall draft pick in a sensational draft. And the season after he played the whole year in the American Hockey League, he scored 100 points. He's never done it since. Ryan Suter, Thomas Vanek, also forced to play down there. Okay, you guys gone through the list? I'm just going to go ahead and wait. I'm not going to sing the Jeopardy theme because I don't have it. And if I did, it'd be copyrighted. And then I couldn't monetize my video. It's quite the list. And what I tried to do, I tried to avoid defensemen for the most part too. And I'll tell you why I tried to avoid defensemen. It is well known that defensemen take longer to adjust to the NHL game than other players. It's easier for a forward. A forward can be kind of crap defensively and get away with it. A defenseman, not really, no. So when I hear Canuck fans whining that Jordan Subban hasn't been given a shot yet, that's what his problem is. It's not the scoring. It's the defense. And as anybody who watched Tom Curvers knows, you have to have both. You can be a defensive defenseman and make the NHL, and that's why sometimes it's safer to look at the prospect that's a defensive guy like a Robert Bertuzzo than an offensive guy like a Jordan Subban, because it's easier to stick that defensive guy in there. If he's big and he's tough, and if he plays well defensively, it's easier to make the NHL. Now, if a guy hasn't played in the American League yet, I suspect he'll probably need 30 games in the American League. Does that mean it's a guarantee? No. There's a lot of players who've done it. Even recently, Rasmus Ristolainen is an example of that. There's Claude Giroux, Philip Forsberg. Even after the trade to Nashville, and everybody says Nashville ripped off Washington, and rightfully so. However, Nashville didn't rush Forsberg into the lineup, and he was a first-round draft pick. Foxa, first-round draft pick. Dallas didn't try to rush him. They put him in the American League, and his game changed. Fox is not the player that he was when they drafted him. I would argue he's probably a better player now than he was when Dallas drafted him. So it's not that when I did these projections that I just said, I don't care about these kids. I've seen too many that have to spend time in the American League first. Some of these guys spent time in the American League because they weren't ready. Some of them spent time in the American League because the GM knew this guy needs to play top 6 minutes. He will play top 6 minutes in the American Hockey League. He will not play top 6 minutes in the NHL. Like, to me, it's kind of funny. It's like, okay, well, we can bring this kid up and put him on the 4th line. Why? Why are you going to put a really talented forward on the 4th line where he's going to get about 10 minutes a game? He's not going to get special teams time. Put him in the American League. That's there for a reason. It's developmental. It's not just for draft busts and old guys anymore. It really never was. But that seems to be the perception. A guy gets demoted to the American League and fans get up in arms. Why has this guy been demoted? I got up in arms because Jake Virtanen wasn't demoted sooner. Because I'm watching as the Vancouver Canucks rush Jake Virtanen to the NHL. And then they don't give him the minutes he needs to progress and develop. And it's one of those catch-22s. You have to say to yourself, well, if he's good enough, he'll get the ice time. Okay, fair. But what if he was good enough and you just destroyed his confidence by putting him on the fourth line? A guy's played top line all the way through junior. He's played top 6 minutes all the way through junior, all the way through college, all the way through any tier of hockey he's played. You get him into the NHL and you say, all right, kid, you made it. Now, you're going to have to learn to play fourth line. You're going to be playing with these two guys here. They're veterans. They're older guys. They can't really score. So your stats are probably going to be crap this year. It doesn't make any sense. Not only that, but then you're asking a 19 or 20-year-old kid who's an offensive dynamo up front, okay, now you got to shut down NHL offense. You're putting them in that position where it's like, okay, now we're putting you in a position where you're not going to get your top 6 minutes. Oh, and you're probably going to be up against guys like Bergeron when we're against Boston. You'll probably end up with Crosby or Malkin for Pittsburgh because they just feast on kids that aren't ready. So, do you think you can stop Malkin? How about Crosby? Because we don't have room in the top 6 right now. And that's why they go to the American Hockey League. That's why when I look at young guys, and DeBrincat and McLeod are the guys who get mentioned the most, I look at them and I say, you know what? Throw them in the AHL. They haven't had the experience at the NHL level yet. There's no rush. There's no reason to rush. Like if the Devils put Heischer in the lineup, I don't have a problem with that. He's a number 1 draft pick. If you look at number 1s, I'm going to do a video on number 1s in a bit here. You look at number 1 draft picks, the pedigree's really high. McLeod's a number 12 draft pick from last year. Throw him in the American League. The Devils likely aren't contending for a playoff spot out of the gate anyways. When somebody gets hurt in your top 6, if McLeod's putting up numbers at the American League level, you throw him in there. That's when you put a guy in the lineup. You don't project him in the opening night lineup and say he's going to play top 6, because that's the other problem. So I've already mentioned a top 4 or a top 6 guy being told, now you're playing bottom 6 minutes. If a kid's not quite ready, and a coach goes to him and says, we got a roster spot open for you. You haven't looked all that great in training camp. We're counting on you. That's what a 19 or 20-year-old kid needs to hear, right? So this is why I don't mind when a team signs all these players and doesn't seem to leave any room for a prospect. Prospects have to earn their way onto the roster. You should have a roster that has 12 forwards, 6 defensemen, and 2 goalies, and no rookies among them going into training camp. Those rookies earn those spots. Those rookies have to knock the veterans out of those spots. Like Arizona. I'm going to use Arizona as an example. You got Brad Richardson, and you got, let's say, Dylan Strome. Let's say Strome comes into camp and he's a little bit off. Brad Richardson comes in and he looks really, really good. And you go, all right, I got a choice. I can waive Richardson with the idea of sending him to the American League to give Dylan a shot in the lineup as a third line guy. Potentially second line, but I don't know that he's ready. Or I can send Dylan down, let him progress in his development, keep Brad on the team because I know what Brad can give us in a third or fourth line role. It makes our team stronger now and later. So it's not that I'm hating on guys. That's what I don't understand as a whole. Oh, you're hating on so-and-so. You're hating on this team. No. I've watched this crap for decades. And when you rush a guy to the NHL, you're going to have Gilbert Brulé. You're going to have Nikita Filatov. You're going to have guys who come in, and you are going to have your stellar guys. You're going to have guys who come in straight out of junior, and they dominate. But those guys, not common. That's why Sergachev in Tampa, too. Maybe he needs some time in the American League first. It doesn't mean he's not ready. It just means he needs top 4 minutes. He's not a bottom 2 guy. And maybe Tampa holds him out for the same reason that I said with the other guys up front. You need to play top 4 minutes. You're going to play top 4 minutes on our AHL team, and you're going to be great. You're going to play power play. You're going to learn penalty killing. You're going to play against the very best league in the very best league in the world. That's not the NHL, and you're going to learn this. And we're going to coach you on this, and we're going to get you ready. And then when somebody gets hurt, you're good to go. So that explains that. The American Hockey League's important. Don't downplay its importance, and don't get ahead of yourself when it comes to prospects. Because teams that get ahead of themselves in terms of prospects, I watched the Oilers do it for years. They'd bring guys in who either weren't ready or just couldn't do it because they left roster spots open for rookies. And I knew Justin Schultz was going to have problems in Edmonton when they basically signed him to a contract saying, yeah, we'll give you the minutes. There was a fight between Vancouver and Edmonton, and the rumor at the time was Vancouver said, we will not guarantee you a roster spot, and Edmonton said, we will. And, of course, we know how Justin Schultz's time went in Edmonton. He goes to Pittsburgh and becomes a really solid defenseman because Pittsburgh played it completely differently. So, again, let me know what you guys think. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And give it up for the American League. I don't think it gets the amount of respect that it deserves. It really doesn't. It's damn good hockey. And there's a lot of really good players that come up through the American Hockey League. So don't jump ahead on your prospects, or you might leave them behind. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.